All right, our next speaker for TRiRODS is Chris Farber, and his talk is entitled iRODS Zone Management Tool and TypeScript HTTP API Wrapper.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Chris, and as Corey just mentioned, this summer at iRODS, I worked on refactoring the iRODS zone management tool, as well as developing a TypeScript HTTP API wrapper. And so a bit about me. So I am studying computer science at Purdue University on the machine intelligence track. I'm going into my junior year, and within computer science, I'm really passionate about website development and machine learning. Outside of that, I have some hobbies like I enjoy video games, reading, and long walks, especially over the summer when I get to walk my dog. And you can see my GitHub, LinkedIn, and personal website if you are interested in any of those. And so getting into the first part, I worked on refactoring the iRODS Zone Management Tool, or ZMT. And first of all, the ZMT is a web application that is built with ReactJS. And it basically allows for the management of data within an iROD zone, such as the resources, users, groups, and specific queries. And at the moment, it makes requests to the iRODS REST C++ API. And my task was to refactor the zone management tool to communicate with the newly developed HTTP API. And so some issues I had when getting started, probably the main issue had to do with CORS, which if you are a web developer, you have likely ran into issues with this. CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing. And basically what was happening was that the requests being sent from the ZMT that was running on my own local host were being rejected by the HTTP API due to the fact that it was running on a different domain, on a virtual machine. And so in order to mitigate this, I basically needed to use something called Nginx. And this allows you to set up what is called a reverse proxy. And this basically allows it to pre-process requests before they are sent to the server. And it basically tells the server to allow requests from other domains that it isn't currently running on. And so that involved a lot of work with like Docker, Nginx, a lot of calls with Corey for sure. But anyway, after getting set up and getting everything stood up locally, I was able to get started on refactoring the zone management tool. And so some of the notable changes, first of all, had to do with the data structures being sent to the API. And so this is the old way that this was being done, for example, to modify a resource. Really what you want to look at is this params data structure. So you can see here we have action, target, and then arg2, arg3, and arg4. And this is in contrast to how the HTTP API now accepts these parameters. And so you can see things like name, property, and value, which each of these, I believe, directly corresponds to arg2, arg3, and arg4. And so you can just see it's a general, like more semantic meaning for these argument names, a better user experience for sure. And if you also notice here in the old method, it is sending requests to the admin endpoint, which in the HTTP API is now no longer an endpoint that is in use. And instead, it sends it to the resources endpoint. And this kind of goes for all the other different kinds of data that can be managed. They all have their own dedicated endpoint for things such as modification rather than a general admin endpoint that they are being sent to. And the next notable change were the data structures that are being received from the API. And more specifically, the responses that are given from gen queries. These are basically used to obtain lists of a given data type, such as zones, resources, users, all that. And so you can see here, this basic list zones function, it takes in the SQL string that is then executed on the server. And in the old REST API, you would access the response by accessing this underscore embedded field, but that has been renamed to .rows. And so that basically just involved like picking through each file of the ZMT and changing all occurrences of underscore embedded to rows. Um, and oh wait, that is, why did it skip to the end? Oh, I think I hit I think I hit home on that. There we go. Okay. And so currently the ZMT has APR for the refactor and it is waiting to be merged and it is pretty much done for or done with. Just need to get a few more commits in. And you can access the GitHub repository here if you are interested in viewing it. And so for the second part of what I did this summer, I developed a TypeScript HTTP API wrapper. And so getting into this, some of the technologies I used for the runtime environment, I used Node.js. For the language, I used TypeScript. For my main library I used for making an HTTP client, basically, I used Axios. And for testing, I used something called Jest. And so getting started, basically, in order to get a sense of how we want to structure this project, I collaborated with the other interns, Chris Lee and Samantha Mao. And we conducted some research for examples of API wrapper libraries. And we came to an agreement on how to approach the project. And we figured that given the different sorts of environments and technologies that we were working with, our approaches were inevitably going to differ in some aspects. However, our main goal was to maintain a similar user experience of the wrapper in the end. And so in terms of my approach, I created a wrapper class that contains an Axios instance, and I basically shared this instance between each endpoint class. And so I made a class for each different endpoint, such as resources. And within each endpoint class, that encapsulates all the different operations that can be done for that endpoint. And Axios, it allows you to create, as I said earlier, an instance of an HTTP client, and you can pass in certain parameters, such as a base URL. And this just allows for ease of life whenever once you use this client, you don't need to explicitly state the base URL each time. It just already knows that because it's stored within that object. And getting into why I sort of use TypeScript rather than vanilla JavaScript. If you're in the realm of web dev or just JavaScript in general, you probably know how important TypeScript is. It allows for custom type definitions for data structures. It's essentially a fancier version of structs in C and C++. And as is with any typed language, you can enforce the parameter and return types of functions, and basically ensuring that the user inputs and receives data in a proper format. And so this basic example here, this function register takes a user of type user data. And this basically forces anyone who wants to call this function to input a username and password of type string. And I created a custom type definition for each operation and each response of said operation. And getting into the example usage of how you would use this wrapper. So you would first import this wrapper class, and this is just TypeScript stuff for the URL components that are passed into the class constructor. But basically, you initialize this wrapper object with this URL components, a username and password, and then you can call the authenticate method, which saves an auth token to the wrapper class. And then from there, you are able to access any sort of operations that you want through that wrapper. And so this is an example of how you would create a collection. You would simply call api.collections.create. And then you would pass in a data structure with a field lpath of type string. And after that, if the data field of this response object is not null, then you know that it went through properly. And from there, you are able to access any sort of fields that you want, such as the iRODS response. And getting into the testing framework that I use, it's called Jest. And this is a popular testing framework that is typically used for JavaScript and TypeScript. And basically what I did was create a test suite for each endpoint. And within each test suite, they contain unit tests for each operation. And I basically had to configure this with my project. And basically that allowed me to say npm run test, and that basically runs all of these test suites. And there are also options to run either a single test suite or a unit test within a test suite, which was nice for some ease of life. And you can see here, this is a screenshot of the output of npm run test. And so I had 9 test suites and 61 total unit tests. And you can see here they are all passing, get this nice green output. But yeah, and getting into the documentation, it's more so a visualization than anything, but this is a nice way of sort of allowing access from other people to get an overview of your repository. I use something called the TypeDoc package, and this basically auto-generates HTML docs for a given project. And so you can see here on the left side of the project, there's this nice little navigation menu with all these drop downs that displays the general structure of the project. And so when selected, when a class is selected, it displays all these methods here in the center. And yeah, it just provides a really nice, like, clean way of visualizing a code base. As for the current status, so it is, of course, in development, but it is ready for others to use. And this is viable in both TypeScript and vanilla JavaScript environments. You can access the GitHub repository here, and this contains some installation and usage instructions if you are interested. And in general, some of these struggles I had, well, first of all, it was locally running the HTTP API and getting those CORS issues resolved. It was setting up the configuration files within the wrapper library. There was a lot of issues with like TypeScript and Jest, and a lot of decisions that I had to do research for to make it as best of a library as possible and as like usable as possible for other people. And finally, it was with handling errors within the wrapper library. And for this, I use something called Axios interceptors, which I'm not going to get too technically into, but they basically just allow you to do something before a response fully goes through. And so I basically use these to say, like, when a status code of a response is 400 or above, which would indicate an error, to reject that request. And from there, like the code would know that, hey, I need to throw an error here. And going forward, I would really like to integrate this wrapper library into the zone management tool. And I believe the primary benefit this would have is, first of all, just making it a cleaner code base. But also, as I mentioned earlier, with the TypeScript functionality, despite the ZMT being a vanilla JavaScript environment, you can still import TypeScript packages and access a lot of the utilities of TypeScript, such as having like autocomplete for the different parameters of a function. And so I'm going to hopefully integrate that soon. And overall, what I've learned this summer, first of all, technically, it was how to contribute to a code base within a professional setting. As the other interns sort of mentioned, there's a huge deal about rebasing. That was sort of the main way that we contributed to code within iRODS. And also how to use tools such as Docker, Nginx, and Jest. And particularly Docker was pretty huge. I think I had always kind of been curious about its use cases before this internship. I never really worked with it at all, but I did find it to be quite useful, and I am more than likely going to work on it in the future in some capacity. And finally, it was how to configure a project to be exportable as an NPM package. I found this process to be very tedious, but also very, very cool because as someone who's worked in web dev a bunch, I've always kind of been curious about like, oh, how do people publish their work and how do you basically make this exportable to NPM so that others can download it and use. And so that was definitely very useful to figure out. Um, and in terms of just general life stuff, I definitely learned not to rush the process and be careful with Git. There's definitely a lot of fine grained approaches that you need to make when it comes to Git, especially within a team environment. Um, and finally, to not struggle on something alone and ask for help from those with experience because they obviously know a lot more than you do. And it's just going to expedite the process overall and ultimately make you a lot better equipped to approach problems in the future. Um, and so that's about it for me. I'm going to open up to questions now, but I just want to extend a special thank you to the iRODS team, especially Corey and Terrell, and as well as the other interns. You were all great to work with, and this was definitely a very valuable experience for me. So thank you.
All right, excellent. So do we have any questions for Chris?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I was just curious, what did you think about using Jest to do testing? Because I've heard of it, but I've never used it before. So I was just curious on whether you liked it, what you didn't like,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
So Jest was interesting. It was definitely really difficult to get configured with my projects because especially with like within a TypeScript environment, you have all these different considerations to make when it comes to like, you know, your compiler options. And that was just very annoying to get Jest integrated into that. Um, but I guess once I got it up and running, it was very convenient to just have that command that you can call like npm run test and just have all of the files in like your configured like test directory to be ran. Um, so I'd say give it a shot. It definitely like it wasn't my favorite, but from what I understand, it's like the most popular testing framework. Um, and yeah, but I'd be interested in researching other frameworks and seeing how those compare.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question. You had two different but kind of related projects. Was it too much? Was it about the right amount? Did you feel overwhelmed?
I wouldn't say I was overwhelmed. I definitely say it kind of felt like that at the start with the sort of like getting everything set up, all the course stuff.
Yeah.
And it was also just kind of intimidating initially, at least to like, you know, keep asking for help, like, oh, can you get on a call right now? But after that, like I'd say everything ran like really smoothly. And yeah, I wouldn't say I felt overwhelmed by the work. It was definitely the right amount.
That's good. Yeah, it's always a challenge for us to try and figure out what is the right size thing to fit a time frame, especially given, you know, unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
But it seems like it worked. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one. So since doing this project, has your view of software development changed in any way?
Ooh. I would definitely say yeah, because at least the majority of the software development that I've done, um, ever since I've started was really like for personal fun. You know, like building out like these fun like passion projects like websites. And I've definitely collaborated in a team environment before, but it's definitely a lot different from doing it within a professional setting and having this constant, I guess, like back and forth feedback between you know, the people that you're working with. And so yeah, I've definitely gained a lot more of a, I guess, like structured view on the process of software development and a lot of what I think are best practices to use going forward.
That's awesome.
Mm.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.